All right. Well, hey, good afternoon, and welcome to another tough conversation. I'm Blake Smith, and the guy beside me there is my brother Cameron, and we blog at blakeandcameron.com, where we believe that your values and your goals should drive the decisions you make about how you spend your most precious resources. And today, Cam, we're going to talk a little bit about uh, time and what that looks like for looking at the year ahead. You know, this is the end of the year. A lot of people are starting to think about, when that calendar rolls over to 2016. And although, in reality, it's just another day that we wake up, the way we treat that is really a restart for a new year and a time to kind of reset and re-engage, some goals and stuff like that. So I know that you and your wife have been spending some time, and I wanted to ask you some questions about kind of what you guys do, and especially since it's your first year of marriage, kind of what that's been like for you. And then as we go, if that's cool, I'll ask you some questions about it. You got anything to
Yeah,
add?
definitely. Yeah, no, I'm glad to be here. For those who I don't know out there in the blab world, yeah, I'm Cameron. I live out in Denver, Colorado, with my wife. We recently got married, like Blake said, in May, out in Kansas City, and then quickly moved out to Colorado for a few reasons. But one is so I could jump full bore into entrepreneurship and also be closer to some of our family out here. But the whole entrepreneurial thing that we're doing really has brought up a lot of interesting issues for me and my wife, and also Blake and I, as we've talked about a lot of things, especially in those columns of time and money. So I'm excited to do it. So yeah, go ahead, Blake. What do you got?
Well, awesome. Cool. Well, I mean, I guess first, one thing I'd want to ask you, and we haven't talked about these questions ahead of time, so
No.
feel free to push back if there's something, I don't know, maybe I dig a little too deep, but I wonder, like, how formal do you guys are you getting about when you look at, New Year's and New Year's resolutions and stuff like that? How formal are you making this discussion when you sit down and say, what do we want 2016 to look like? What do we want to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So before I was married, I would spend, a few hours in December sort of looking back at the year that just happened and sort of planning and thinking in my head of, what the new year should be and what are some of my goals. I would journal a little bit about it. But this year, it's been interesting. One is I'm married now, and so it takes a lot more conversation, a lot more committed, formalized time to sort of navigate what in the world are we going to do next year.
Mm-hmm.
And we really feel like we have a ton of stuff that we have to figure out. There's a lot of uncertainty, especially on my job side of things of, what's going to be pulling our time, where are we going to be making money, all those things. And so we actually jumped into a lot more formal process. And it started about 2 weeks ago where I was like, hey, Lindsay, I got a lot of stuff on my mind for a few months. Random things have been bubbling down, and I sort of started to condense them down into different themes of, hey, we need to tackle work, finances, our vacations, like some of our dreams and goals. We need to talk about our budget and our financial goals. And we had a big list of these things, and then we sort of started having really broad and general conversations about them, just over, in the car or at the dinner table. And now, since we sort of have a lot of stuff out there and we sort of scratched the surface, we're trying to dig deeper on each one. But it's sort of been a process where you take a bunch at the top and we're funneling down to actually have some clear goals and values for 2016.
Wow. Okay. How do you even keep track of that? Is that just something where it's in your heads, or are you, I don't know, do you have a sheet or
Well, I'll
something?
tell you,
Oh, okay. There you
this
go.
is my journal here. And then, I mean, I don't know, you'll be surprised. I mean, there are papers here with just pages and pages of, I mean, things like this where we're trying to do it. And a lot of this is because I'm probably in a slightly unique category of people where it's like, I don't even know where my my next paycheck is going to be coming from
Sure.
in lots of ways. And so there's a lot of stress with that. And so I'm trying to figure out, okay, how do I lead my family well? How do we make sure that 2016 doesn't come back and blow by us? And we're sitting here a year from now in December 2016 being like, hey, what do we try to do this year? And trying to remember all that kind of stuff. And so that's some of it. But I'll tell you, Blake, one of the first things we did was just sort of do an analysis of our time. And, this is a subject that we're passionate about.
Sure.
On our blog. But this is a real rough sketch, but I'll hold it up here. And I don't know if it'll be a backwards thing, but we just sort of tried to figure out where do we spend most of our time. And so it's sort of time there on the x-axis. And it's just like we started filling in just random big categories of things. And we quickly realized, like, we listed out, probably 15, 20 things we wanted to do next year, from, hey, take a trip down to the Mexico or Aruba or Belize or something like that, fun. And then also, like, Lindsay wants to learn the piano, and, we're trying to work on learning a foreign language, things like that. But we put it all there, and it's like, oh crap, we have no time to actually do almost any of it if we're actually real with ourselves.
Oh, interesting.
Because if we take our work, and it just, go ahead.
Well, no, that's what I was going to ask. So what drives out that list of, fun things, trip, language, piano skills? What's pushing that to the margins?
Yeah. So great question. Well, some of it is just sort of necessity, right? So our time, the bulk of anyone's time goes to work, right? So 40 hours a week or more, or maybe less, depending on the situation. And then we've decided, we have a list of values that we try to frame everything down. And so some of our values, a big one that takes up a lot of our time that would maybe push learning Spanish off to the side perhaps, was like serving. We want to be a serving force in our community, especially like with our church, with different organizations. And then we also, the second one that consumes a lot of time is just nurturing close friendships and really saying no to other things in order to be available multiple times a week to invest in friendships.
Cool. So it sounds like, that's really cool, the way you started with the values. But that was a separate conversation, or maybe how you even started, like, what do we want to do with our year next year? Well, it needs to align with these things that we know we find important, right? So so for you guys, relationships with others, relationship with each other, and then what are some other those values that you'd be willing to share with us?
Yeah, exactly. So quality time with family, both my in-laws and you and our other parts of our family, and then our marriage. We sort of lump that into that, is, creating time and space for our marriage to thrive. We put live with the future in mind. So thinking of how we're going to steward our money, also the environment, like nature and things like that, and our own legacy was one. And being healthy in what we eat and the things we do for physical activity and stuff like that. And a few weeks ago on our blog, blakeandcameron.com, a guy wrote a comment, and he listed out 8 or 10 of his and his family's values for the year ahead. And it was really fascinating. As I thought about it, I wanted to do something really similar and have these like sort of one-liners that Lindsay and I could then, whenever we were presented with an opportunity to go on a vacation, a trip, or spend money or do something, we could be like, hey, we narrowed down what we want 2016 to be about into some of these things. And then so now literally we have this list, but it came from a huge list that like was nasty and messy and, arrows and all that kind of stuff. But we funneled it down into those things that now, as we move to the goal setting stage of how much money do we want to save and where do we want to, what organizations do we want to join or serve, we can sort of say like, hey, well, does this line up with one or more of these values?
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. It's very interesting that you've actually taken the time to do that, because I think so often we talk about like how important it is to, this is a dream of mine or something I've always wanted to do, or even like what are things that are important to me or my family. But you guys have actually taken the time to kind of have those conversations. and,
Yeah.
ask each other that, and then work, like you said, filter it down and work it out. And I'm sure, well, obviously that first, or the list you held up was all scratched out. Not everything makes the cut, right? So you've eliminated some things that you don't hold high enough. And it's like that saying, like, when everything is a priority, then nothing's a priority. You face that
Exactly.
in jobs that the boss is always like, this is my number one priority, and this is my number one priority.
The,
So yeah, you can't focus on, a million different things and make progress anywhere. So you guys have actually
sure.
done that. I'm interested, like, what's something that maybe you thought was going to make the cut, but didn't? Is there anything on there, either how you're going to spend the year ahead, or maybe in that, even the priority or the values list?
Yeah, I think some of it was, a lot of it was figuring out, hey, are these the same values with different sort of phrasing? Like we wanted to say, serve others, so what does that sort of mean, or be involved in the community? But how does that sort of actually play out? And I think right now, over the values, we really didn't have too many that sort of didn't make the cut. We were able to condense it down to, I think, a list of 8 things. But we've begun now talking about, okay, what's the practical how-to of each of these values? What are the goals we're setting for those? How are we going to make sure we abide by that? And just yesterday, we were driving back from some Christmas family time and got stuck in a snowstorm on their way. It was a pretty disastrous drive from our folks' house, Blake, up to our house in Denver. It took 4 hours,
Nice.
so pretty terrible. And we were talking about all this stuff, and we were realizing it's just like, it was a constant back and forth. It was just like, hey, well, we said that we wanted to go spend a week on a beach somewhere, maybe around our anniversary time, because that's a tradition we sort of want to start. But it's like, okay, but we have family reunions to try to navigate. We have Lindsay's side of the family. We have trips that friends are like, hey, let's go do this or do that. And we're like, well, we can't do it all. Lindsay has limited amount of vacation days. We have limited amount of money. And so that is when the tension is sort of there a little bit more, not necessarily in our relationship, but just like in both of us, like, hey, we're confronted with the reality that we can't say yes to everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the truth, I think, but at least you're facing that reality now, and then you're able to prioritize those things, and or maybe even put them in a timeline order of what you're gonna do throughout the year. So did you guys talk about that, like, here's 5 or whatever the number of things is you did, and we want to do them all, but if we only do 1, here's number 1, and if we only do 2, here's number 2? Is that some way to work through it?
Yeah, it is. It's sort of assigning a weight or a timeline to some of those different decisions, and that's when you get to the nitty gritty, and you really figure out, well, how important is it to you, and are you going to make the sacrifices it requires? Because saying yes to the trip to Mexico for us means saying no to getting together with some of our closest friends, perhaps, or only spending half of a week with our family each, or something like that. And you just sort of got to make those choices. But when we're trying to put it through that lens of, okay, what is valuable? And if it's like, we're not going to go to a random trip to maybe, New York City, when we don't have close friends there necessarily, or it's not close to family, but it'd be a fun trip. But our trip more is like, we want to disconnect and sit on a beach and just relax. So that's part of our marriage focused value. So you just play that balance out. And as I'm talking about all this, I definitely want to say to some of the people that are watching, hey, if you have a comment or a question on some of this that you'd like me or Blake to tackle, if you are working through something similar, have advice for us, write it there in the comments for sure. But Blake, this is sort of a rough sketch of the thing that I put there. It's like, our values lead to our goals, right? And then our goals, to make those accomplished, these maybe should be arrows going back and forth. It's sort of the practical how-to. How are we going to do this? what are the things that sort of help us accomplish the goals that the goals give us? Like, hey, we're saving up for a down payment on a house or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then people, who are we doing this around? Who are going to be our supporters or the detractors or the hard things about those things? And sort of the place of what's it involved. Like, is it Denver? Is it Mexico? Is it things like that?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think that's a great visual, and especially for you guys as you're talking through it, just to kind of help work through each of those things that are important things to work out. What about
Sure.
that the people aspect? Well, actually, there's two things I wanted to hit on as you were talking, and one was that pressure from I don't, not pressure necessarily negatively, but there's influence and pressure from the outside of how you're going to spend your time and what you're going to do, with your year ahead as you plan it out, or even with your week ahead. And that can be,
Uh-huh.
and you hit all around it, family obligations and expectations for, travel to a family event or something like that, or friends and the ability to get with that. What have you found? How have you found to kind of work that through in your own heads, but also as you and Lindsay are beginning your lives together, to realize, the decision really starts within your own home, and not everyone's going to get what they want outside of, your house.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, that's the crux of the issue there, I think. And we're probably not doing it the best we could. I would imagine, hopefully as we continue on, we can understand that. But one point of tension has been, hey, are we too inwardly focused right now? Are we thinking about nothing but ourselves? We really believe in sacrificial serving, sacrificial giving, those types of things. And I think, Blake, you and I can relate. Like, our family has really pushed towards, like, hey, we want to make the time and effort to be together. This is really important and critical time for us as a family. And on Lindsay's side, she's like always a lot more external focused to how can I help and what can I deny in myself to go and give to others that I know, that my family, or to strangers or people that I'm trying to meet as well. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I mean, I would just encourage you in that, that that's just the way it's going to be sometimes. Like, not everybody is going to be pleased. Some people are going to be disappointed. A lot of people will understand it, especially when your reasoning is, hey, look, we've looked at everything on the table and on the calendar, but here's the decision I need to make for my family. Here's the decision that we as a couple, have to make for the benefit of, our marriage and or whatever. And if those are good
Yeah.
reasons to be able to say no. I was just in a similar situation where we're traveling, this week's a big holiday week. We're about to travel down to be with Katie's family in North Carolina. And they had a huge gathering yesterday down in central North Carolina with, like, her mom's huge extended side of the family and the big family reunion. Well, it was like, we're either going to travel down Saturday night or we're going to follow our plan and go down on Tuesday, tomorrow, which is what we originally said. So we'd have to bump up our schedule 3 to 4 days.
Wow.
And we just moved into our new place in Virginia. So I literally spent my day hanging pictures and cleaning out the garage and dragging stuff out to the, for the trash man to pick up tomorrow and stuff like that. And we had to say to the family, we're not going to make the annual, family reunion because we're still in boxes in our house and we can't go for another, week or another 4 extra days away that we weren't ready to do. And so it was just
Yeah.
one of those things. And they understood. I put it maybe a little more easier and lighter than that, but it was a conversation that Katie and I had to have too, because it was, what's the priority of my family versus, what we're doing here and all those things. But the reality is we have to make those decisions all the time. And I would just tell you, Cam, like, that decision needs to be between you and Lindsay, and for me, within my family, for Katie and I to make that decision to say, Like, here's what we're going to go, here's what we're going to decide. And now we go out with a united front and express that decision to people who may be disappointed with it at times, or hurt,
Totally.
or just disappointed or whatever, because people always want your time.
And it's fascinating because some of those things are long term. This was planned 3 months ago, and it's decision time, and you can't come. Or sometimes it's like last minute or spur of the moment, like, hey, everyone's going to go see the Star Wars movie, like, come on out. But you had allocated your time or money differently, or you and your wife had thought about that. But that external pressure to do things is profound, and it's unavoidable. But if, like you were saying, Blake, just you and Katie came together, resolved it, and then that strength and that decision then can withstand some of that pressure, because those people are incredibly important sometimes, and sometimes they're just random events. But that is that allows you to make the progress on where you want to be as a family, as a couple, long term.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let me ask you this: like, as you guys talk through some of the things you're going to do, how did you take that and look at how did that work into your finances as to whether, one, you can achieve it, or how you're going to achieve it, and maybe set some of your own financial goals? How did that kind of transition into the reality of things cost money, trips cost money, not working allows you to not, or keeps you from getting that money? Talk a little bit about that.
They say financial stress is one of the biggest stresses in a marriage or in ordinary life, and I completely agree. And for me, for the people listening, like, I pretty much make $0 right now, and I'm spending more money than I make in order to launch some businesses, and so it's a really tough issue for us, especially as we are kidless and thinking about, well, how do we make wise choices, looking forward to, if we're going to attempt to have, kids at one point. And so for us, it's sort of weighing, okay, how do we be responsible to where we need to be in 40 years when we're retired? So we need to be saving money in order to do that. So we know that siphons off money. We know that we want to give money away and be generous to others. So that takes out a portion of it. And then, just like we look at 12 months of the calendar and say, hey, well, we have this amount of weekends and this amount of vacation days, how are we balancing out? It's almost the same for money, except sometimes it's a little harder to part with money, I think. So it's like, for us, we are using this system called YNAB, You Need a Budget. And we've been doing that for about 4 to 5 months now. And that has allowed us to articulate our values into, like, real world things that we'd actually, spend money on, such as a vacation or plane tickets or things like that. And so using that tool of YNAB, it's really alleviated some of the stress, because we have a pocket of money that for 4 or 5 months we've set aside, saying, hey, this is going to be our Mexico money.
Okay.
And now we're trying to figure out, well, when can we use that pot of money that we've saved over here? Or, hey, we want to give money to these causes and to this church that we go to. Well, it's not like we're cutting back our standard of living to do that. No, we've incorporated that into our holistic financial picture.
Yeah, very cool. Well, and I think it sounds like what you're doing is, you in the past you had a goal, you're putting some money towards it, raising it up, but whether or not that ends up getting spent on in Mexico, to use your example, is a matter of each time that you have your conversation, you decide, hey, this is what I want to, or this is still where we want to put that money, because it's cash in your account.
Yep.
And so until, you've spent that, you guys need to decide and look at each other and say, yeah, this is still what we want to do.
Yeah, definitely.
What about Justin's question?
Yeah. Any thoughts on how to best utilize free time or redirect it towards your values and goals? I often find that I waste lots of free time and wish I could have used it better towards something productive, relaxing, or life-giving. Yeah, I think that's a money question. And for me, so I wake up each day and have really no set schedule. And so I've struggled through this a lot, Justin. And what I have found is the day before, or the night before, when I'm shutting down, I sort of write out a list of the goals and the must-dos for my next day. And if that's work related or if it's more like leisure related, like, hey, I want to take care of this thing or go on a 30-minute run or do something productive, relaxing, or life-giving, I put it on there. And then you get the satisfaction of checking it off when you actually do it. But the internet is one of the worst things for sucking time, like Blab. It's a great tool and a great resource, but it's amazing if you're on you just do this on your smartphone and you're scrolling Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or random things out there. And that's fine, but you really have to eliminate it. And that's what I found is, like, I focus on a task, hyper-focus for an hour, maybe 2 hours for me, and I don't let other things distract me. My Gmail, my text messages, I focus on it. And then when I close the book on it, I can open up and allow myself the freedom to do that. And I still feel very productive.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's really good. The other thing, I think, let yourself have a little bit of free time, but then at the end of the day, you've got to be pretty smart about what you're doing to kill time or relax, because some things can be a time suck. So for me, I put it on a calendar. If it's not on a calendar, it's not happening. So
yeah,
I've got blocks for email. I've got blocks for working out. I've got blocks for not working. And so that way I'm actually scheduled and I can fit in again what some of those priorities are. And then I get to the end of a task. I'm like, what am I going to do with my time? I don't sit there and waste it. Now I've guilty of wasting time just as much as the next guy, but those are some of the tasks. So, but hey, dude, I think it's been a great conversation. Speaking of values, I've got a sick kid at home, so I need to go tend to him and kind of cut off our time here. But I appreciate, Cam, you taking the time to talk through some of the personal stuff that you're working at. So you want to just tell everybody who we are, and then we'll sign it off.
Yeah, definitely. Great conversation, Blake. Thanks for your questions and for the participation of you guys. And Justin, thanks for your great question there at the end. But we are Blake and Cameron. We blog at blakeandcameron.com. And we're passionate about having these tough conversations about making sure your values and goals influence and affect the way you actually spend your time and money, that those values and goals are paramount and have the priority and that trickle down effect there. So subscribe to our email newsletter. We send it out weekly at blakeandcameron.com. You'll see the sign up link there. You'll get notified of our blabs. You can follow us on Blab, but we try to host a conversation at least once a week, if not more. So thank you all. Blake, thanks a lot for your questions, and we're pumped to see you all next time.
All right. Thanks, Cam. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.